So in this video, we are going to be continuing to take a look at a scenario where civilization starts over. We are now on episode 35 of the series, and in the last episode, we saw a few events happen all throughout the world. We saw an anarchist and communist rebellion group break out over here in Central Asia. We saw a new alliance form in the Balkans. We saw the expansion of Egypt. We focused on more decolonization. And at the very end of the episode, we started a war. So if you do end up enjoying this video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and let's get straight into it. So beginning exactly where we left off in the last episode, we will be focusing on the war in Asia. So, to give some, reminder of how this war started, China figured out that India had been going behind their back, funding rebellions in their country, and also kind of trying to surround them and starve them economically. They had been doing some weird economic stuff that I will talk about later in the episode, because that will actually have some backlash. But China found out. They left the GCL, which is India's kind of global-led alliance, which has an ulterior motive, which I haven't revealed, but China left said alliance. India was not too happy about that, and India has been trying to weaken China for a long time now. So, with China leaving India's clutches, India, along with their alliance, declared war on China at the end of the last episode, and after enough yap, we will now be looking at said war. So, taking a look at the alliance layer, we can see that the Triangle Alliance is India, Bangladesh, Persia, and then these two African nations. But I also did say that some other countries did join, and that was Korea and Tokyo. Tokyo is a leading member of the GCL. They were funded by India, like I said in the last episode, but they will be helping India out in this war. So yeah, let's get straight into this war. So it starts off with China rapidly mobilizing their military and navy, and this navy's layer is slightly outdated, but I am going to be using it. And they begin to rapidly advance their navy into the Korean Sea, or the Yellow Sea over here, hoping to quickly knock Korea and Japan out of the war to focus fully on the main Triangle Alliance. They surround the waters of Jeju Island, and shortly after they make a landing on it, before making a landing on the southern Korean peninsula. Over here in Japan, it's a little bit different. Tokyo is rather strong, surprisingly, and they are able to fully take out this Japanese island, and then they hold a naval blockade in the water. Over in the Indian Ocean, with the Strait of Malacca under their control, India brings a bunch of naval ships through and up into the South China Sea, and they start bombarding a lot of these coastal Chinese cities. Now, one thing to mention is China did have some allies of their own, being Beijing and the northern Korean country. However, they were actually funded by India to leave China's alliance, which is the reason that they did in the last episode. It might have been 2 episodes ago, and of course India did this to weaken China. Now, back over to Korea, China does see some success. As I said before, they are trying to get these guys over here out of the way as quickly as possible. However, the Indian Navy has now fully reached these waters. Like I said, they had already been bombarding the coast, but now they will actually be making a landing in China. Not on China though, Taiwan. They make a landing in southern Taiwan, quickly capturing this major city, and then they continue to move up the island. They spearhead over to this other major city, and the island fully comes under their control. This was actually a very fast military operation. This only took about 1.5 months. Over in Japan, the Japanese Navy meets up with the Indian one, and they begin an island hopping campaign over these islands right here. And after this, the Indian Navy, which at this point is very much stronger than the Chinese Navy, moves up here to help out Korea. They make a landing on Jeju Island, and a lot of Chinese troops that had been garrisoning here are captured, so this is very bad for the Chinese Navy. Along with this, the Chinese forces who had been seeing increasing success capturing this city and sieging this one are now kind of just bombarded from the coast. Supply routes that are kind of sending all the resources needed to fight this war to these troops are cut, and this allows the Koreans to push back. And at this point, China is holding a steady naval defense of their shores. But at this point, there is actually going to be another country joining in on this war for a little bit of revenge. And that is going to be the South Chinese / the Hainan country right down here. In World War I, China slapped them around, and they got beaten very hard. And they are looking for some revenge. So they join the war and send all their troops in at once. Now, the reason they do this is they know that China will overwhelm them if they don't kind of just push in as hard as they can. So they really put a lot of effort into this. Also, with this happening, India asks South China to allow them to, use them as a staging ground. Let us put our troops in you and we can move further up north. However, South China doesn't really want to collaborate with India. I've only shown them as being in the Triangle Alliance to kind of make it easier to see what's going on. They are actually working on their own here. They attempt to take this major city, but China at this point has kind of moved their troops down here and they have organised them, and they begin to push this country back. Not wanting this opportunity to go to waste, however, India makes a pretty rushed landing on the Chinese coast, and because it is, of course, quite rushed, it actually fails and they are kicked back off. Back over in South China, they are kind of fumbling it. They get pushed back a lot, even going into their area. They even lose one of their two mainland major cities, and at this point, India is like, okay, yeah, we're going in. They make a landing in Hainan and kind of just take control of the country. Yeah, this is kind of some weird operation here. Then the Indians take control of the government, like I just said, and they tell the Hainan troops saying, hey, you work with India now. They don't really, protest that. They are, like I said earlier, kind of on the same side. But this now allows India to actually ship their troops into Hainan. And with the actual good Indian troops here now, they are able to make some pretty good attacks. They kind of just move around the Hainan area, and then they begin to invade into China once more. Along with this and some better planning, India is actually able to make a pretty successful naval landing in this little jutted out bit over here, capturing a major city, moving up north, capturing another. Now, the Indians' plan here is basically just to go from south to north. They kind of just want to move up in this kind of populated area right here. They don't really have any plans to make any other naval landings. However, Tokyo and Korea actually think that they can make another naval landing, and India kind of doesn't want to stop them, so they just say, yeah, go ahead, you can give it a go. So they are going to be attempting to do just that. The Navy of Tokyo, which has been heavily modernizing recently, actually manages to defeat the Chinese in a pretty major battle and make a landing right up here. Now, this is very bad for China, as this is rather close to their capital area. I'm also going to show the province layer now, kind of just showing distribution. India already has been threatening a large population area down here, but this one is even more major. The Indian forces now moving out of Hainan, and I'm going to show them as Indian troops because that's what they are. They move over and attempt to meet up with this other landing. However, a very nationalistic Chinese force is able to hold these guys off right here. Right at the river, they are kind of just holding it. It'll be known as the Battle of whatever this river is called. However, the Indians then kind of just decide to take the slower route, and instead of encircling the city, they just go ahead and take it. Now, this does cost them a few more soldiers, however, it's kind of the only option. And after that, they move up north, capturing 2 more major cities. Back up north, the Tokyo country does manage to continue around this advance, now meeting up with the Yellow River, I think. Is this the Yellow or the Yangtze? I actually don't know. Anyway, that's unnecessary. What is necessary, though, is that they capture these 2 major cities right here, and the people in China are kind of freaking out. And they're about to freak out even more, because the fascist Chinese country enters into the war. These guys are also a revanchist country from World War One. They lost a lot of land to China, and they got humiliated. And seeing the fact that they've kind of been on the rise recently, they will be jumping on this opportunity to take as much Chinese land as possible. Now, they have a very interesting strategy known as the Blitzkrieg, which is basically just putting all your units at a high density point, smashing through enemy front lines and using it to encircle troops. And it's actually very effective against China. And India looks at this strategy and they kind of see how dangerous it is, so they start to develop anti-Blitzkrieg strategies. Anyway, speaking of the Indians, they begin to move around very quickly at this point. China is getting rather overwhelmed. India has shipped a very large portion of their navy, or their soldiers, over here now. Speaking of China getting cooked, up north, Tokyo manages to kind of just break through the front lines, and they walk through the lesser populated areas. We also see something pretty shocking happen up here. Basically, that happens, which isn't very good for China, as a lot of troops were stationed here, all the troops fighting on this front line. These troops then proceed to get murdered, and the Chinese continue invading into the other Chinese. Now, at this point, the people of China are just saying, yeah, we may as well just surrender. However, the absolute monarchy in China doesn't want to surrender. They are very nationalistic and they are very kind of furious with India. So the people of China are actually going to be overthrowing the Chinese monarchy and establishing a democratic government, which is actually very interesting, especially considering the fact that if we look at the rest of Asia, there are actually no democracies except for this guy right here and this guy down here. But with the overthrow of the monarchist government, we see a little bit more fighting, more specifically just with these guys. The Indians also send a convoy out to the capital over here. And yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at this peace treaty. So in this peace treaty here, we can see that China has been reduced pretty heavily, although they are still rather strong. India does understand that they were pretty important in helping them win World War One, so they don't go too harsh on them. I'm going to break it down step by step. So first things first, Tokyo got this Chinese island and these islands going down here. Taiwan was released as an independent nation. They are, you know what, I'm actually going to change that. They are going to be a constitutional monarchy. Also, as I just showed there, China is now a democracy. Now, with the fascist country, they actually did not get too much, and that is because India heavily limited how much they could get. This is a point of tension between them. However, they did get a lot of their former areas back near their capital. The southern Chinese country gets a little bit of land, and China is forced to join the GCL. And with China joining the GCL, their economy starts to get a bit worse again, which is pretty weird. Speaking of the GCL, there is just one more thing I want to talk about with them. They get this orange country to join, kind of just new and easily influenced. At this point, India's outstretching influence is very large, but anyway, that is it for the Chinese Peace Treaty. Now, speaking of influences, I haven't done this. I think I might have done it before, but I really want to do like an influential sphere kind of showing. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that in now. I'm just going to do it for India. Their influence stretches up here into northern Asia, and overall it's kind of like this. So India is very much shown here to be an extremely dominant power, and along with this, before I get into another event, I am going to really quickly do the power rankings, because I haven't done the power rankings in actually quite a while. Oh yeah, this thing is really outdated. I think the last time I did this was before World War One, but let's do it. So, the current strongest country in the world is India. The second strongest country in the world is Galicia. The third strongest country in the world is... I'm gonna give number 3 to Pyrenesia. Now, to note, there is a pretty notable... actually, I forgot about Sweden. Am I stupid? Number 3 is Sweden. Then there's a pretty big gap. And at number 4 is Pyrenesia. At number 5, it is going to be England. At number 6, it's Central China. Whoops. At number 7, it's actually going to be like a country that hasn't been on here before, I think. It's actually going to be the USB. At number 8, by the way, they profited a lot of selling arms in World War One, which got them a lot of money, and they are actually coping a lot better than other countries in this economic state. At number 8 is France. At number 9, I'm going to give number 9 to Egypt, and at number 10, I am going to be giving it to... there's actually a lot of candidates for this. I'm actually going to give number 10 to Tokyo. They are a country that has actually been on the rise recently, and India has been kind of heavily funding them. So these are the new top 10 power rankings, and the next time I will be updating them is when a big event happens. And the next event, which might be the final event of this video, I might do another war, but we will be looking at some more decolonization. And more specifically, we will be looking at the complete decolonization of China. In the peace treaty, they lost a lot of stability with this region, so they will be fully giving it away, so I will draw that in now. In 3, 2, 1. So these are the new Chinese countries right over here. And at this point, decolonization is ramping up pretty heavily, actually. especially with the American countries, as I had said before, due to just the complete insane amount of population in some of these countries, they are losing stability heavily. The English actually have the worst stability with their colony, as we saw they lost this guy as well as this guy. The next country to be giving up some colonies is actually going to be a new one. It's actually going to be Galicia, and they will be giving up these two pretty large portions of their colony. Now, luckily for Galicia, these unstable bits are like the furthest outreaching parts of their colony, like, really down south here in Ecuador, and then up north in this kind of like Chilean area. This is more of a northern Argentinian country, actually, but yeah. So, for the most part, Galicia is fairly stable. Now, with Pyrenesia, due to the just sheer amount of population in Pyrenesia, there is actually a lot of talks of gaining independence, but the Pyreneesians, they are very, very reliant on this colony. Giving it up would destroy them, so they are really, really hesitant to let any groups break away, and they are going to start repressing a lot of these movements. And over in the English colony, we see this small New Brunswick country break away right over here. The English are rapidly losing stability, and it's kind of their own fault. They are rapidly giving away control of this area, and it's kind of just making it so more and more groups are calling for their independence. So they kind of shot themselves in the foot here. We also see the first African colony get independence, very surprisingly. And, well, it's not surprising when you realise who is the country releasing this colony. It's actually going to be the USB releasing their colony right here. They release this kind of Republic of Congo country. It's going to be this pink team right over here. Now, the only reason they got this colony is because they kind of wanted to prove to the Europeans that they are a strong power as well. And they got that. They don't really have any purpose for this colony, so they are just going to be letting it go. But now there is one final event in this video that I need to talk about that is actually very important, and it is over here in India. So with the GCL, India has really risen to the top. They are the #1 economy in the world, and they are, you could consider them to be the backbone of the world economy. They are the #1 exporter, the #1 importer. They are very big on product, and they have a lot of companies throughout the world. And at the minute, the Indian stock market is booming, and there is something I need to talk about with the GCL, and it's actually the World Bank has kind of been influencing the countries in the GCL, kind of pulling money out of these countries and shoving it into India, which is why we had actually seen a lot of countries do worse in their economies. This is a very sketchy and hidden program. The only two countries that know about this in the entire world are Tokyo and Persia. They actually revealed this to them, and their economies have been improving a lot as well, which is why we've seen Tokyo be able to advance so quickly. But why am I talking about this? Well, after a very large period of economic boom in India, something very bad happens. The stock market in India, which has just been going up and going up, crashes, and this will officially be entering the world into the Great Depression. But that is actually going to be it for this video. If you did enjoy, please make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.